past, you've argued, and still do, that there are certain synergies between supervision and regulation of financial firms and the conduct of monetary policy and the Fed's lender of last resort function. If we were to go back, Mr. Chairman, and review the minutes and transcripts of all FOMC meetings between 2003 and 2008, I wonder what fraction of the time would have been devoted to issues involving supervision and regulation of our, say, your holding companies or our holding companies. Was it half the time? Was it a fourth of the time, an eighth of the time, a tenth of the time? In other words, give us your judgment on that.
Well, in a typical meeting, there'd be very little discussion. Well, let me take that back. Recently, we've talked about it quite a bit because of the financial crisis. But it depends on the situation. There are periods like recently, but also, for example, in the early 90s, when the banking system's problems were what was called the financial headwinds and were holding back economic growth, where those issues were important and were discussed. Under normal circumstances, they would be discussed much less. That's absolutely right. But to reiterate what I said to Chairman Dodd, although I do think that the bank supervision is helpful in monetary policy. It provides us with information we otherwise wouldn't have, and there are some academic studies which show that there is a link between bank supervision information and Fed monetary policy responses. I, again, would put a much heavier weight on the financial stability function, whereby in order to be a lender of last resort and to know how to respond to an ongoing crisis or threat of crisis, we need to have the expertise, information, and authorities associated with being a bank supervisor.
Would it be fair to say that before the crisis in the last couple of years that not a lot of time was spent on regulatory and supervision, talk and discussion?
Let me remind you of the structure of the Fed. The Federal Open Market Committee is about monetary policy primarily, and that is so the general economy, inflation, unemployment, and so on are the primary issues.
It's foremost, is it not?
I'm sorry?
That would be foremost what you...
That would be the foremost issues in the FOMC. Of course, the Board of Governors, as opposed to the FOMC, has responsibility for overseeing the system's bank supervision activities. And of course, that activity is ongoing, and particularly recently, as we've worked hard to try to both address the crisis and to correct the problems, it has been a major priority for the Federal Reserve.
Mr. Chairman, do you believe, you've been on the Fed quite a while now, and you've been chairman this your fourth year. Do you believe that the Federal Reserve, even under your tenure, not your predecessors, before the crisis hit, when you first went there, first year or two, was doing more than an adequate job of supervising and regulating the holding companies, which subsequently got in such trouble? Not just Citicorp, but a lot of them, and that was all under your watch at the Fed as a regulator.
Well, again, as I said before, there are failures all through the system. We heard this morning the Bank of America is paying back its TARP.
That's good news.
That is good news.
When are they going to pay it back?
Immediately.
Any day?
In its entirety, yeah, immediately.
Okay.
So as we go through the bank holding companies, as I said, we ran a stress test of the bank holding companies in the spring, and of the 19, I think it was 9 were declared to be in good health, and they paid back their TARP, and then the rest have all raised capital. So those firms, in some sense, have not been the crux of the crisis. The real problems have been mostly outside of the bank holding companies.
Let's go back